Vaigu Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaigu Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by the Sikh Research Institute. Today's class is a part of the live series Love and Justice through Guru Nanak Sahib. This class, as always, will begin with a 40-minute lecture followed by 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. So please drop your questions in the chat box and be sure to include your name and city. Now, I would like to introduce you to our instructor, who I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's during today's 12th and final week. We have Asha Marie Kaur. She is a research assistant with Sikhi. She has a BA in political science and international studies from Northwestern University. Her work at Sikhi is tied to her love of the Persian language and the ways it connects Iran, Afghanistan, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent. Please welcome Asha.
Vaigu Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaigu Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the last session of Love and Justice through Guru Nanak Sahib. I'm really sad that today is the last session, but I am also excited. I am going to try to leave more time than usual for questions at the end. So I really encourage people to ask questions. Otherwise, Manvinder is going to have all the questions. And though she has many questions, I would love to hear from you. And they can be general things. It doesn't have to be necessarily about today's session. It doesn't even necessarily have to be about specifically the course material we've gone through. It could be general questions about Sikhi or resources, any questions you have of other places to go for more information. It could be a question about stuff that I've done at Sikhi, literally anything. So we're going to open up that time at the end, but we do have a course session for today on applying Guru Nanak Sahib's teachings to our very tumultuous contemporary world. So I will get started with that. Yeah, so what have we done so far? I think it's really helpful when closing a chapter to look at what has led up to it. So let's go back to our course overview and see how our learnings have progressed throughout these 12 weeks. So we started with the beginnings of the Sikh faith that were a little more broader structure based, as well as historically grounded. We started with the introduction to the Sikh paradigm. So that's, as we know now, the introduction to the Ik Onkar paradigm, the paradigm of oneness. That is the nucleus of the Sikh worldview. It is the first and most ultimate step to living a Sikh way of life and to knowing what a Sikh way of life is. Then we moved into the Bhakti movement, because this is a time period, a group of people, a social movement that is very connected to the social context that Guru Nanak Sahib came out of. And a lot of the actors in the Bhakti movement are contributors to our Guru Granth Sahib. They're the Bhagats of the Guru Granth Sahib. So it's really important to know what this movement was and who were these radical poet spiritualists and what made them so subversive of the overarching norms of the time, and what is their lasting legacy, and how does it again connect back to the Ik Onkar paradigm? Because that connection, that alignment with the Ik Onkar paradigm is why they were brought in to the Adi Granth and then the Guru Granth Sahib as contributors. Then we moved into other historical influences of the era. We also helped break down the kind of false notion that is quite common, both honestly among Sikhs and non-Sikhs, that supposedly Sikhi is a blend of Hinduism and Islam. So instead we looked at, okay, what were the historical contexts, and how does Guru Nanak Sahib and how does the Guru Granth Sahib and how does the Sikh faith engage with these contexts, but is still its own path that stands on its own. We then talked about the Janam Sakhis, or the witness narratives, which are our primary historical source for knowing about the events of Guru Nanak Sahib's life, and how these can be kind of a perplexing body. It's a perplexing body of work. It's a perplexing set of sources, but also one that has a lot of richness to it. And sometimes that richness gets overlooked in kind of the mainstream historical lens. And then, of course, we went into introduction to the Guru Granth Sahib. We talked about who the contributors were. We talked about Rag. We talked about what information you can get about a Shabad just from looking at the physical page. We talked about interacting with the Guru Granth Sahib, and we talked about the language groups that are in Gurbani. So that set us up really well for directly engaging with Shabad. In this course, we focused on Shabad by Guru Nanak Sahib. We started with Mool Mantar, which is the root verse, the first verse of the Guru Granth Sahib of Gurbani, and how Mool Mantar contains both the qualities of Ik Onkar, but also provides a call to action for us to emulate those qualities. And then we got into some particular topics that Guru Nanak Sahib tackles through the Shabad that he revealed. We talked about death, featuring Azrael, which is the Abrahamic angel of death, who is referenced throughout Gurbani by various contributors. Actually, we released a video today for our Persian word series where I talk about the use of the word Azrael, as well as Malak al-Maut, which is another name for this figure, and how does metaphor and differing contexts work in the Guru Granth Sahib. So yeah, everyone should check out that video. It's on all of Sikhi's social media. We talk about tyranny and authoritarian rule and war crimes and violence against women through Babur Vani. And then we talked about the violence of the caste system and what Guru Nanak Sahib has to say about that oppressive structure in the South, which is very prevalent in South Asian context. We talked about gender. We talked about both the reflections on women and femininity and gender expressions that are found in Gurbani, the feminine voice in Gurbani, how Guru Nanak Sahib interacted with women in his own lifetime. And then we talked about prayer. We talked about what it means for the Guru Granth Sahib to discuss the practices of other faiths, despite being the charter and manifesto for a faith that is new and stands on its own. And we also talked about what prayer looks like in a way of life that seeks to dismantle rituality as a blind practice. So yeah, that gave us a really, I think, a pretty expansive introduction. Though it is only an introduction and it only scratches the surface, it was a great way of getting a little bit of an insight into a lot of different overarching themes and a lot of big issues that have been at the forefront of society's questions for centuries and millennia. And now we're going to talk about exercising the faith. We're taking all our learnings and we're figuring out how to apply them to the world around us. Sikhi always has to do with the world around you. The Gurus created a path that engages directly with reality. We can't just run off to the mountains to meditate away from worldly issues. We have to tackle those issues head on. So how do we do that? How do we do that in a way that aligns with Guru Nanak Sahib's teachings? How do we do that in a Sikh way? Because it's not simple. There's always work to be done. There's always self-development to be done. There's that chiseling, both on a personal and societal level, to carve out the world we want to live in, and to carve out a world that reflects the creator-like qualities as revealed by Mool Mantar. So I would like to begin with a line of Shabad that is from Bhagat Namdev, one of the Bhagat contributors to the Guru Granth Sahib, because I feel like it's relevant to today's world, and you will immediately see why it's a very direct and obvious connection. Halle yara, khosh habari. O friends Oh friends, any good news? From Pakat Namdev, page 727 of the Guru Granth Sahib. And when one asks this question, a mental image along these lines comes up these days in the year of 2020, according to our calendar. These are not the easiest images to look at. They reflect a lot of difficulty, a lot of unrest, a lot of injustice in our world. This has been a tough year. We have the map of coronavirus cases. We have uprisings against authoritarian rule in Hong Kong, in the United States with Black Lives Matter, in India. We have a horrifying situation right now in Beirut, where the government is not helping its people after it failed to protect its people from an extremely large amount of explosives. We have protests in Iran. COVID is hitting Punjab, which is such a central place for the Sikhs, for our history, for our people. And we've had a series of horrifying, violent attacks against Sikhs in Afghanistan, including a particularly fatal attack in March, where 25 Sikhs were killed in an attack by the Islamic State of Khorasan province. So, and this is kind of this is the end of a chapter for the Sikhs of Afghanistan, who really are making the decision to leave to safer shores. So it's been a tough year, and this is like the tiniest little snapshot of the countless difficult things that have happened this year. There's a lot of bad news that is weighing on us. We are forced as a society to ask really big questions about how we're going to move forward. And there is the possibility that a lot of the structures that we know so well, that we're so familiar with, will have to be overturned altogether in order for us to move forward. We're really hitting a lot of breaking points. And that is the sort of era that Guru Nanak Sahib lived in as well. We're facing actually quite similar crises that the people of his time were as well. So I actually do think that there's a lot that we can gain from Sikhi in these very tumultuous times. And since I don't want to, I want to kind of respond to the question that was invoked by Shabad in the previous slide, I'm going to show you another line that's from the same page on the Guru Granth Sahib from Bhagat Kabir. Bande Khoj Dil Har Roj, Nafiyat Pereshani Mai. Humble servant, that's you, that's me, that's us. We're the humble servants of Ikonkar. Humble servant, be within your heart each day, not ambling in confusion. Ejo dunya sihir mela dastagir nai. Jahal. This world is a magic show. There is no hand holder. Pause, reflect. Again, that's page 727 of the Guru Granth Sahib. So, yeah, we're not the first people to be overwhelmed, and we won't be the last people to be overwhelmed. But the answers lie within us, because Ikonkar has all the answers, and there is no separation, again, between creator and creation. That's something that we've talked about throughout this course. This world has an onslaught of distractions, an onslaught of difficult things to digest. There's so much going on all the time, and I think that this line, Ijo Dunya Sihir Mela, this world is a magic show, is so much more relevant. I think it's even more relevant in the era of the internet. It is just like information coming at us, distractions coming at us all the time. It's impossible sometimes like it feels literally impossible to process. And it feels like there's no way out, you know. We keep seeking comforts, but they're so fleeting and temporary. And it sounds kind of pessimistic to say, Dastigiri Nai, like there is no hand holder. But the act of letting go, that is the first step of acceptance. And we can't settle down and be grounded before we let go of distractions and we stop chasing after those fleeting comforts. So when we know that this just is how the world is, we can release a little bit, and then we can orient ourselves to the only true comfort, which is ikonkar, which is oneness. And once we start immersing ourselves in that way of thinking, we're much more free. We're much more liberated. We are liberated. The service to ikonkar is the only service we should have, you know? There's no servitude to man-made leaders the way there is servitude towards ikonkar. So this is actually, you know, it kind of seems like a pessimistic take, but in fact, it's quite liberating. So yeah, and ikonkar is the nucleus of the Sikh worldview. But what are the next steps? How do we articulate Sikh worldview? Because that's where there's some specific steps, and that's where all of us need to kind of figure out what those are, and that way we can enact them. So there are three major facets to building a Sikh stance on a question. But I'm going to go back for a little bit actually. So I want to kind of caution against what I would say are the two kind of tempting and easy directions to go when attempting to articulate a Sikh worldview. So some people tend to think, okay, well, there's a lot of religions in the world that do have a pre-designated articulated body of law. There is no such thing in the Sikh faith. We have Vrit Maryada, which outlines what a Sikh way of life is, but that's, again, it's not a body of law. And the Guru Granth Sahib is certainly not a book of laws. There are no, you know, outlined specific commands. So the task of building a Sikh worldview is a lot more complicated than just opening the Guru Granth Sahib and saying, okay, well, this line mentions this, so I should go ahead and do this in my life. You know, it's never that simple. And if you're looking for answers that way, there's a lot of answers you simply won't be able to find because things are not written in that. They're not meant to be explicit commands in that way. Furthermore, we've talked many times throughout this course about how complex the references made in the Guru Granth Sahib are. So it's not always immediately obvious why something is there and what the context may be. And there's also a personal relationship element. You have a relationship with your guru. You have a relationship with wisdom. So it's not going to come out exactly the same for each person who engages. So that's one kind of tempting path that people fall down, and it usually ends up being unsatisfying. It usually ends up kind of collapsing in on itself because, as Professor Purn Singh said, we're the people of spirit, we're not people of the book. So the second kind of tempting way to go is that, you know, Sikhi on a very, I would say, it's obvious to many people that Sikhi has more progressive ideals embedded in it than many other faiths. And there's a lot of non-Sikhs who look at Sikhi and are kind of astounded by the open possibilities of the Sikh faith and the extremely staunch commitment towards justice and protecting the marginalized. this, in conjunction with the Ikonkar paradigm being all-encompassing, can lead some people to say, well, the answer is obvious. There is a blanket progressiveness in Sikhi, so we already know the answer. We don't have to dig deeper. And this oftentimes ends up trending towards, I would say, correct. But that's not how one articulates a Sikh worldview, and that's not really articulating a Sikh worldview, because you haven't actually engaged deeply enough to kind of give a full picture, and nothing is really that simple in the way we live as human beings. So yes, it is important to always center the complex explanation, the complex argument on the Ikonkar paradigm. Absolutely, that's the nucleus of the Sikh worldview, so it has to be the center of any Sikh response. However, it's not the only step to our articulation. So our articulation has to be a little bit more than that. So what are the three facets that we need to keep in mind? The first is Bani. So that is the word of the Guru. That is primarily the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the Sikh scriptural canon, the Sikh charter, the Sikh manifesto. And this is a journey. You need to have a personal relationship with your Guru, have a dialogue. You know, we make learnings out of dialogue. And also your relationship with your Guru has a relationship with the other bits of wisdom in life that you interact with the other things you read, with the other things you write, with the people you have dialogue with. Bani also encompasses the wisdom recorded by Guru Gobind Singh Sahib, by Gurdwas, and by Nand Lal Goya that are not within the Guru Granth Sahib itself. So, for example, the Persian ghazals by Nand Lal Goya go into kind of the body of wisdom that would be considered Bani. So next we have Tvarik, or history. So we have the exemplifications of the Gurus during their 239 years on this earth. We have the revolution that they founded, which became kind of the bedrock for the Sikh faith and for the Khalsa Panth, the sovereign body of the Sikhs. We can survey their lives. We can understand them in a social, political, economic, and spiritual dimension. There's so many aspects to their context. And we see people enacting their relationship with the divine and how they answered questions and how they overcame struggles and how they dealt with complex situations. We see activism in a very explicit sense. And we see how living out Sikhi and contributing to the sovereign body of the Sikhs is an active process, and that there is always more transformation to be done. So Tvarik includes the Guru period, and then it also includes the way Sikhs have, as a community, as a sovereign body, responded to issues since the formation of the Khalsa Panth in 1699. So this is, we live in this world, and so our history up until now matters and can help us articulate what a Sikh response looks like. And the last is Rahit, or lifestyle. So lifestyle is how you can take the message and the revolution and make them relevant to one's personal life. So this is not limited just to, the written down codes of lifestyle of the Sikhs, and it's not just about questions of ethics, but it's about how a Sikh tackles ordinary life and also prepares for those extraordinary challenges in times of conflict. It is an incessant chiseling, just added to my favorite word. And it's a commitment to Guru, a commitment to wisdom. It is an acknowledgement that there are many contradictions in life, but through living a Sikh lifestyle, one can reconcile these contradictions. And yeah, it becomes an immersion in a particular way of life. It's living life with all those qualities of Mool Mantra that we have talked about, being as all-pervasive as possible. And this is gathered and then written down in the form of Zretname. And we have the Written Maryada, which outlines what a Sikh lifestyle looks like. But this is kind of a way of giving sort of, I don't want to say mainstream, but like kind of a legalistic structure through a collection of perspectives on Sikh personal and public life. So then it becomes consolidated into this code of conduct of lifestyle. So again, it's more complicated than just these are the laws, these are the rules. Like there is an active process that goes into articulating Rehet, and there's an active process that goes into writing Retname and writing the Written Maryada. So Sikri does a great job of exemplifying this process of articulating a Sikh worldview through Bani, Tawarik, and Rehet. A primary example of this exercise is the State of the Month report, where we kind of pick a large issue and send out a survey to Sikhs worldwide in something like 28, 30 different countries. And then based on the data, we kind of have an idea of where Sikhs themselves stand in their lived experiences, which is very important. And then we go through Bani, we go through Tawarik, we go through Rehet, and and we see actually how Sikhs are living their lives, and we can articulate what a Sikh stance might be. So we have State of the Panth reports on abortion, on the Akal Takht Sahib, who is a Sikh? I mean, even questions that seem so simple require an active engagement to articulate an answer for. On Anand Karaj, the Sikh marriage, we have our next report is going to be on sexuality. So this is such a process, and I think these are really great reports. You can download them for free, and it's really great to look at kind of this step-by-step engagement and how sometimes, again, it's a journey and it takes effort, because you may not have explicit keywords that you can find in Gurbani that give you the answer to the societal issue you're exploring. But Gurbani tackles all aspects of the human experience and all aspects of the divine experience. So the answer is there. It's just sometimes it takes a little more to get to it. Now, if we're looking for a Sikh stance on caste, for example, that's much easier to elevate and lift out than, for example, the Sikh stance on abortion. And if we're looking for, say, the Sikh stance on social media etiquette, that's obviously not going to explicitly be in the Guru Granth Sahib, but there's so much relevant wisdom. The Gurus, the Bhagats, they talk about interpersonal conduct. They talk about the dangers of slander, for example. So it is all there, but it takes a constant effort and engagement to be able to really apply that to one's life in a way that isn't just plucking stuff out. It's that actual relationship that you build, and it's a dialogue with yourself, it's a dialogue with your guru, and then, having dialogues, we learn in Sangat, in congregation. So discussing with others what our views are, engaging in teaching and learning, like with this course, that's all a part of living out the Guru's message, and it's part of that chiseling process. So I did put a lot of suggested readings on the handout for today, and I have a new one, which is a new article that came out recently that I thought was a really great example of how a journalist is talking about a contemporary and ongoing political issue, and in a mainstream news article talking about Bani and Tariq and Rehed and constructing a Sikh response. So I think it's a really wonderful lived example of how to apply the Guru's teachings to our contemporary world. We have the Sikhi Faith and Followers pamphlet, and we have virtual version as well, of course. And that kind of will give a better idea of Sikh practice that developed after Guru Nanak Sahib's lifetime, since this course has been kind of limited in scope to that which was created and formulated in Guru Nanak Sahib's lifetime specifically. We have How to Develop a Sikh Response by Harinder Singh, which again is a wonderful resource that really walks one through step by step. We have a reflection on kind of the status of Sikhs and their questions of sovereignty today by Harmeet Shah Singh. The State of the Panth on Abortion, I think, is a really wonderful report to look at. We have webinars on all sorts of topics. You've seen Manvinder advertise them at the end of each course. We have a Sikhi and Sexuality webinar by Sikh Research Institute, and again, that will be the topic for our next State of the Panth report. And we have Harinder Singh and Ryan Singh Kohli responded to a Sikh reality TV show contestant. It was the Great British Bake Off, which I love, and I hope everyone takes some time to watch it at some point. It's very soothing. There was a Sikh contestant who was openly gay and received a lot of backlash for this, and Harinder Singh and Ryan Singh Kohli wrote a response to this homophobia from a Sikh stance and affirming LGBT rights from a Sikh stance. So again, that's a real engagement, dealing with the reality that there is homophobia in our community and in our world, and figuring out how to respond to that in real time as people need to be, protected and affirmed. And then this latest article has to do with responding to ongoing questions of politicization and co-optation of Sikhi from outside actors, and how to avoid co-optation by, again, as we said throughout this course, going to the source. What does the Guru Granth Sahib have to say? What does our history have to say? What did our gurus have to say? So yeah, again, a really wonderful look at how in our occupations we can be creating Sikh stances and worldviews and articulations all the time as well. This is a journalist really showing how to do that in his career. So I think it's a wonderful piece, and there's so many more amazing things that Sikhi has to offer. We've read so many amazing readings in this course from a lot of different authors. I hope it's been a holistic introduction. I hope everyone has gained a lot from them, because I know I did from reading all of the things that I've shared with you. So I do have a little task that I would really love for people to complete for me. Not trying to be, the teacher giving homework, but I would really appreciate this. So let's practice this look at Bani, Tariq, and Rehed to the best of our abilities based on the materials that have been provided in this course. Pick a social issue. It can be one that we've touched on in this course or something from beyond. However, it might be easier if it's something we kind of alluded to or touched on in this course, because the Bani will be more clear and available to you. But if you're comfortable searching for your own examples of Bani, please go ahead. That would be awesome as well. And try to write a paragraph using the framework of Bani, Tariq, and Rehed on how Guru Nanak Sahib's principles apply to the issue. And yeah, I think the readings listed for this session can help provide an expanded scope, especially because this course was limited to the history, life, and Bani of Guru Nanak Sahib, but there's so much more out there. And remember, Ikankar is always the unifying principle, and the overarching paradigm, it is both the place to start and the place to end. And I think it's really helpful to have a place to start and a place to end whenever we're doing a thought exercise or producing a piece of writing. So it's wonderful that we always have that to guide us when looking at things from a Sikh stance. And I would love for if you could email me with what you come up with. I'm putting my email again in the chat box in case people need that. And I would also love 1 to 2 paragraphs with feedback on the course. That can be anything, what you liked best, things you'd like to see in the future, questions, just anything at all, applications in your own life that you've noticed in the process of taking this course. Yeah, just anything that comes to mind. It's not that structured. I would just love to have your feedback because we'd love to bring more amazing experiences to you. I would also like to say that I am there's a video series that's ongoing on Persian words in the Guru Granth Sahib that I'm taking a deeper look at. And we have the Persian Voice of the Guru series that goes through the Persian Shabad of Guru Nanak Sahib. And we're continuing that series with Persian Shabad from the Bhagats and from Guru Arjan Sahib. So I'm really excited about that. So you can read the articles, look at the linguistic context, see transcriptions in Perso-Arabic script, and listen to podcasts. So whatever your preferred medium is, it's all available. So I just wanted to give a little plug for that because I am actually starting a new chapter. I'm starting my PhD program, but I do have content that is going to be continuing. So I wanted to share that with you all. So yeah, this is the end of the material for Love and Justice through Guru Nanak Sahib. I really want to thank all of you. This has been an absolutely wonderful experience. I really wish you all the best on your journey. Please reach out if there's anything you want to ask, if there's anything you want to discuss a little bit. And thank you for bearing with me through COVID times and weird internet issues. And thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday evening to be here. I know that we have a lot of competing priorities. So I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the great questions everyone has asked, the great feedback people have given. And yeah, it's really been an honor. And with that, we'll just leave the last 20 minutes for questions or discussion.
Beautiful. Thank you, Asha. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A box, but I would encourage everyone that's here attending virtually to throw their questions in the Q&A box, and Asha would be more than happy to answer them. So the first one comes from Surinder in Hawaii. They ask that they want to better understand your comments on clan names like Brar, Gil, etc. Sounds like you felt these are ego-related instead of being just historical reference. E.g., I have read that Brars migrated north from Jaisalmer into Punjab, searching for more fertile land to farm. Can you provide more context for your comment previously? And I can send that to you directly as well, Asha.
I actually can see it in the Q&A. Open that tab. Yeah, so I'm just going to give like a short answer for this. This might sound a little, maybe a little harsh, but I think it is fundamentally true. There's the notion of clan names in a South Asian context, in that clan cannot all be separated from caste, is a little iffy. For the most part, clan names have all the signifiers that would allow people to surmise caste. And so that's why I said that they are ego-related instead of just being historical references. It's very hard to kind of have this neutral historical reference when it comes to surnames in the South Asian context. And the line between clan and caste is extremely blurry and oftentimes non-existent. Fundamentally, in South Asian context, when people are trying to ascertain someone's caste status, they're looking for what region their lineage is originally from, what occupation generally people of that lineage partook in, and all of that information is available within these clan names as well. There's a reason that Guru Gobind Singh instituted the names Singh and Kaur. The idea was to abolish these caste and clan names and also to abolish patriarchal naming. So a woman would have her own identity and would not have to subsume the identity of her father and then her husband. So Singh and Kaur are the names provided to the Khalsa for a reason, and that is because there's just so many markers that are available within last names in the South Asian context that it's really, really hard to escape the ramifications of caste and knowing people's caste status.
Thank you. So our next question is, often in the Ardas, the priest recites history of Sikh wars and martyrs, etc. When did this become a practice, or is this from within the Guru Granth Sahib?
Yeah, so Ardas is an excellent example of highlighting and illuminating our Twarik, our history. So Ardas, the Sikhs can add as a body to Ardas. It's not from within the Guru Granth Sahib. There's also lines of Ardas that come from the Bani of Guru Gobind Singh, for example. And so this was not practiced in, the reason why we haven't discussed it in this course is it was not practiced in the time of Guru Nanak Sahib. It's something that was institutionalized later and under Guru Gobind Singh. So, but there is the ability to add to that body of Twarik as a sovereign body, as a Sikh. And yes, it covers, for people who don't know, there's a discussion of martyrdom, discussion of wars. There's a line about being separated from Gurdwaras, historically being separated from Nankana Sahib. So yeah, again, like anything in Sikhi, as a body, as a sovereign body, we can add to Ardas. However, you cannot just go around editing Ardas. This has been an issue. There is co-optation of Sikhi by kind of self-declared living gurus, and there's co-optation issues where people kind of edit as they please, that's not what I'm talking about. So yeah, but again, that came later, and that's why we didn't discuss it in this course. But that is an example of Twarik. That is, everything that's in Ardas is there for a reason, and the word Ardas comes from the Persian word for supplication. So it is what's recited before making a specific supplication, and then one takes the hukam from the Guru Granth Sahib in order to search for an answer to one's supplication.
Thank you. We also had a great question. Sorry, I just almost lost it. But it comes from Jojo from Chicago. They ask, Sikhi is more than a philosophy, but it does deal with learning in a serious way. How does a Sikh worldview influence your experience as a student and teacher in academia?
That is a great question. I have to say I am so grateful that I have been so immersed in Sikhi for the past 2 years, and it also happens to be the 2 years leading up to my graduate career. And I know this sounds like a cop-out answer, but it's absolutely true. It's influenced every bit of my experience as a student and teacher in academia. I think learning, is a process, and exercising your brain is like exercising any muscle. It's something that needs to be done regularly. And I think that to be in academia and to be creating knowledge is to know that answers are not clear. They don't jump out at you. People spend years formulating answers. Information can always be absorbed to a greater level. Conclusions can be shaped by so many different forces. Sometimes the conclusions we had before are not the conclusions we will have later, which is actually the disclaimer that's on the Sikhi translations of Shabad. We say, Shabad is infinite, we are very finite. This is our reflection from today, which may be different from yesterday and may change in the future as well. So there's no fixed answer, and that's why it's so much work to be in knowledge production. And I think when you're practicing that with Sikhi, it doesn't become siloed off. And I think that's like a gripe I have with academia. Sometimes, things it's like, oh, well, this is how we'll be in academia, and then we're not going to connect it to the real world. We're not going to make it relevant to the real world. We're not going to make it accessible to the real world. But Sikhi by nature is accessible and is engaging with all aspects of the human experience. And so I can't be siloed off in an ivory tower as an academic if I'm approaching academia from a Sikh perspective. So that has been so helpful. The Guru Granth Sahib is written in language that was understood colloquially, for example. So I can't get away with being high and mighty and using big fancy words that people may not know, because it's like, I know in my heart of hearts that's not useful, and that's not going to inspire, and that's not going to transform society, and that's not going to build a revolution. To do that, one has to be accessible, which is how Gurmukhi was structured. It's how the Guru Granth Sahib was given to the people, and so I aspire to be that way as well.
Thank you, Asha, for that honest answer. Our next question comes from Gurpreet Singh in Hamilton, Ontario. They ask, can one have justice in the absence of love, as required that justice is blind, impartial? Is the Zafarnama a document outlining justice or a document communicating love?
That is a really great question. Okay, so can one have justice in the absence of love, as required that justice be blind, impartial? So I don't think that there's any aspect of Sikh justice that is really impartial. I think that Sikh delivery of justice always considers context, and I think that we saw that, very eloquently and carefully revealed by Guru Nanak Sahib in Babar Vani, when he talks about the difference between a lion attacking a lion versus a lion attacking a herd of cattle, for example, like between two powers hurting one another versus a power hurting a defenseless group. So I think there's all context is always considered when it comes to the delivery of Sikh justice. But I think impartial is not really how I would put it. I would say like there's a firmness and there's a conviction, and one isn't going to stand down, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's impartial, Impartial justice can oftentimes end up replicating oppression. We have a justice system in the US, and we have a death penalty within that system that oftentimes gets applied to people who have committed relatively, even nonviolent crimes that out of self-defense even, and then aren't getting applied to, the crimes that are, that plague society, that affect millions of people. So when justice is blind and when it's impartial, these differences get lost, and when one loses sight of these very real facets of reality, you actually end up recreating the oppressive system. And, the Sikh worldview acknowledges that there are multiple oppressive systems as well, and that one can turn into the system that you're trying to fight if one is not careful. So I actually think that Sikh justice is quite clear-sighted, and the words in various languages, in Punjabi and Persian and Sanskrit for clear-sighted, are quite common in Gurbani, because that is a quality of Ikankar that we seek to emulate. And I think the Zafarnama, which, by the way, for those who don't know, is a Persian poetic letter, Nama means letter, sent to Emperor Aurangzeb by Guru Gobind Singh after Guru Gobind Singh defeated him in battle, after Aurangzeb's men tried to surprise ambush Guru Gobind Singh's army. So it is a very firm document. It is one that does not mince words, and it is one that talks about delivering justice. The most infamous line is "Chunkoras hame hilate dar guzasht, halal est burdan be shamshir dast." As long as all other modes have been exhausted, it is halal, it is pious, it is just to win sword in hand, to raise the sword. So yeah, I actually think that there's a lot of love in that, because again, it's very clear-sighted, and there is, because of our love for people who need justice, like that's what motivates us to keep going, and that's how we articulate what needs to be done. And also, this is a letter that was written. That's an act of kind of sitting with and engaging with someone despite them being oppressive and awful. Like Guru Gobind Singh is still trying to impart knowledge on someone because he believes in the transformative power of knowledge. Now, whether or not the person you reveal this knowledge to accept is a whole other thing, but there is that engagement there.
So as a quick follow-up to that, Gurpreet also asks, perhaps, we can quickly answer that, and then we have, I think, one or two more questions that we may have time for. But as a follow-up, is there then a connection more than coincidence that Kirpa is the root for Kirpan, and when justice is meted out with violent but ultimate means, we give our opposition/enemy a blessing?
So I'm going to admit I don't know what the etymology of the word Kirpan is for sure, but I really love that idea. I actually don't know if it could be a coincidence and it could be connected to that root. I don't know the answer for sure. But yeah, that's I really like that connection, and I think that even if that's not the etymology, I think that's a really good way of thinking about the delivery of justice from a Sikh lens. So yeah.
Awesome. So our next question comes from Sandeep in Atlanta. They ask, what is a good, simple self-reading to start with for initiating immersion into Guru Granth Sahib?
Ooh, okay. This is a good question. So Sikri is working on the Guru Granth Sahib project. The idea is to create an immersive translation of the entire Guru Granth Sahib available online to all who seek it. It is a huge project, and so far we've only tackled Asa Kibar, but I do think it's a good place to start just because of the depth. Every single word's background and etymology is explained. There's in-depth explanations for each body of Asa Kibar, and all the context is given, so you can really see the richness. You can really engage on a deep level. As far as I've obviously read so much about the Guru Granth Sahib, but as far as I do recommend the book that I've talked about, Gurbani, Its Language and Grammar by Harinder Singh, Sanderpal Singh, and Jaswant Singh. I think that's a really, getting to know the grammar and vocabulary is really helpful if you're going to be reading the Guru Granth Sahib in Gurmukhi. And then I do think that if you're going to approach this on a larger level, it's actually kind of helpful to look at things not like on an issue basis, but different academics that have tackled the Guru Granth Sahib and explaining it in their books usually focus on particular themes related to their work. So, for example, Nikki Guninder Kaur Singh, who we've read a lot of in this course, does a really great job of talking all about the feminine in the Guru Granth Sahib and representations of the divine in the Guru Granth Sahib. And as far as, I think that if you read the works of Professor Puran Singh, for example, it's not necessarily on reading the Guru Granth Sahib itself, but I think that it really gets you in kind of the right mindset to immerse yourself in Gurbani. And there's a lot of really poignant reflections on what Gurbani is and what Gurbani means to invoke, and the sort of emotional engagement and experience with immersing oneself in Gurbani. I can totally, Vidar, do we have the ability to email everyone who signed up for the course?
We do have the ability to email everyone.
Okay, yeah, I could make a specific kind of reading list, maybe like 5 to 6 sources, so that people can kind of in a self-directed way engage with the Guru Granth Sahib, because yeah, I think that it's a task that is, I think oftentimes we feel like it's this difficult task when really it's your own personal relationship, but there's, it's about carving out that readiness and that headspace in order to go on that journey. So yeah, I'm happy to provide sources. I wish I could give you like one perfect book, like that would be awesome. But it's really kind of piecemeal. If I have some ideas in my head, so I'd be happy to share that.
Thank you. I wish there was also a book, and particularly a beautiful English translation of the Guru Granth Sahib, but soon.
Look, when I was at Darbar Sahib this winter, they have the translations on the screen. I was thinking to myself, oh, I can't wait for Sikhi's Guru Granth Sahib project to be up there. And then I remembered that it's a lot of years of hard work still before we get there. But it was a nice image that I had in my head.
Beautiful, amazing. Yes, I too look forward to the day where I will, not have to read the word Lord many times.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought came to my mind when I saw the word Lord, and I was like, sigh.
Yeah, one day. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap today and the final session up today. I'm so grateful to have been able to sit in on the background of this class and a little selfishly ask all of the questions that I've always been curious about in regards to Sikhi. It's definitely helped me both in my personal understanding and in my academic engagement with the faith. So as we say goodbye to Asha, I think we can all reflect on all that she has left us with to approach understandings of Sikhi and Bani through a critical lens, always chiseling away in our understanding. I'm sure we'll always think of Asha when we come across the chiseling. I think, and I'm sure attendees now and before can relate, giving us these tools to formulate a full Sikh response, the Bani, the history, the Rahat. I think it would help us understand ourselves as a people and grappling with the Sikh paradigm and what we understand that as and how we personally engage with it. And yes, I would be more than delighted to share the resources with everyone. Hopefully, those will be in your inboxes soon. Just to wrap today's class up, I would like to remind everyone that our next live webinar is on August 15th, so this Saturday, the 6th in the Punjab, where Amandeep Sandhu, Harinder Singh, and Sardavish Singh We'll discuss the events from 73 years ago when two nation states were carved by the British map making, Hindustan and Pakistan. What's next to secure the Sikh aspirations and the Punjab's autonomy? You can register at sikhri.org/webinars. And if you're missing Asha's voice, she's regularly on the Sikhcast, a podcast produced by Sikhi, where we explore the various issues and events affecting Sikhs worldwide. Thank you so much, Asha. Thank you so much, everyone that attended. This was a delight. And for the final time, thank you for joining in. Today's live class will be ending now. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Thank you so much.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.